If you stood at the altar, hand in hand with your new bride, and your pregnant ex-wife collapsed in front of everyone, would you run toward the future, or face the past you abandoned? The music cut off mid-beat. At that exact moment, every champagne flute trembled slightly, suspended in shocked hands. The luxurious marble floors of the Langford Grand Hotel glistened under the golden chandelier light as gasps rippled through the room like falling dominoes. She collapsed. Right there, at the center aisle between rows of manicured socialites in designer gowns and investors in tailored tuxedos, she fell. A pregnant woman, barefoot, disheveled, her face pale, her dress wrinkled, her hair swept messily behind her ears as if she'd rushed straight from a hospital bed. The groom froze, his hand still tangled in his new bride's fingers. His smile vanished in an instant. "Charlotte," his voice cracked. People turned toward the source of the disturbance. Photographers instinctively lowered their cameras. The wedding had already been a public spectacle. The kind of exclusive event that trended in every corner of the city's elite circles. But no one expected this. Lying on the pristine aisle carpet, clutching her stomach with trembling hands, was the woman he left behind. His ex-wife. And she was very visibly pregnant. Security stepped forward. The wedding planner gasped. The orchestra stopped mid-note. Guests whispered, unsure whether to help or to retreat. But one figure didn't move: Nathaniel Carrington. 39, charming, ruthless, wildly rich. A self-made tech mogul and now the city's most envied groom. He had just exchanged vows with Cassia Fairchild, model, influencer, and heiress. He wasn't supposed to see Charlotte ever again. Not like this. Not at his wedding. Not in front of everyone. And certainly not pregnant. Charlotte Bennett had sworn she wouldn't come. Not because she didn't want to. She wanted closure. She wanted answers. But most of all, she wanted to forget. That morning she had stared at the ivory envelope on her kitchen counter, the one that read Carrington Fairchild Wedding, by invitation only. She hadn't RSVP'd. Why would she? After all, her divorce from Nathaniel had barely finalized 3 months earlier. She discovered the affair not through a private investigator, but through an Instagram post. A tagged photo, Cassia in white, Nathaniel beside her, champagne, laughter, hashtags like soulmate, forever love, heputaring on it. And no one, not even him, had the decency to tell Charlotte it was real. No warning, no explanation, just silence. Disappearance. She was 6 months pregnant when she learned he'd moved on. 6 months into the child they had prayed for, planned for, fought to have. And then he was gone. No goodbye, no apology, no conversation. Just lawyers and headlines. Charlotte Bennett, former PR executive turned full-time wife, had once believed in fairy tales. Nathaniel had made her believe. Back when he was still working from a laptop in a basement. Back when they had ramen dinners and fell asleep in each other's arms watching Netflix. Before the yachts, before the penthouses, before the money had changed everything, before Cassia Fairchild. So why had she come? Because this wasn't just a wedding. It was a war zone. And she didn't even realize she was entering it until her body betrayed her. Her obstetrician had warned her, no stress, no standing too long, no sudden changes in blood pressure. But Charlotte didn't care. She needed to see him. One last time, she needed to know. Did he even flinch? Did he feel anything? Did he know the child she carried was his? The drive to the Langford had been a blur. She wore the only decent maternity dress she owned, tied her hair back in the car mirror, and drove herself through afternoon traffic with a trembling hand on the wheel. She hadn't eaten. She hadn't slept. And as she stepped into that ballroom, late and unnoticed, her knees buckled under the weight of every unanswered question. Now, Nathaniel stared at her, wide-eyed and breathless. Cassia beside him said nothing. Her expression froze, uncertain whether to be jealous or horrified. Cameras clicked again, not out of excitement, but out of instinct. Every outlet would cover this. The wedding of the year, interrupted by the pregnant ex-wife. Security approached. One of them whispered into a walkie-talkie. "Nate," Cassia finally murmured, but he wasn't listening. He walked. Step by step, like he didn't know what else to do, he walked down the aisle, leaving his new bride behind. He knelt beside Charlotte. Her lips were dry, her hands icy, but her eyes locked with his like steel meeting fire. "Charlotte," he said again, softer. She didn't speak. A nurse in the crowd ran forward. "She's dehydrated, call an ambulance." Someone obeyed. People moved. Whispers flew. Nathaniel didn't let go of her hand. He didn't move. He just stared at the woman he had once sworn to love, the woman carrying his child, now collapsed at the very altar where he had just promised forever to someone else. And that's when he realized he wasn't sure he meant those vows. Not anymore. Charlotte Bennett hadn't always been the woman people forgot. Once, her name had weight. Not because she came from money, not because she had powerful friends, but because she made herself matter. In boardrooms, in brainstorming sessions, in every corner of the marketing world. Before she became Mrs. Carrington, she was simply Charlotte Ray, the rising star at Cobalt Strategies, a boutique PR firm in New York known for shaping tech legends. She was 26 when she met Nathaniel. He'd just been featured in an obscure startup blog for a cloud storage platform no one believed in. He walked into Cobalt's pitch room with a laptop under one arm, an anxious smile, and a prototype that crashed twice during the demo. Everyone passed. Everyone except Charlotte. She saw past the nerves, past the glitching software. She saw someone with vision, raw, ambitious, desperate for oxygen in a city built to suffocate dreams. So she took a risk, a private consult after hours, a few social strategy tweaks, a rewritten mission statement, a few well-placed calls. 3 months later, Synchrospace went viral. Nathaniel's face was on TechCrunch. Investors called from Tokyo. Journalists lined up for interviews. And beside him, always just outside the frame, was Charlotte. She never asked for credit, never wanted the spotlight, but she was the one who built the story. She crafted his public image, tailored his speeches, softened his tone, and taught him how to sell not just a product, but himself. Every piece of his rise was rooted in her fingerprints. They moved in together after the first funding round. He proposed on the rooftop of their first apartment, with string lights, champagne, and a shaky voice that made her cry so hard she couldn't say yes, only nod over and over. They married quietly, no press, just a lakeside ceremony in upstate New York with 30 guests, acoustic guitars, and a flower crown in Charlotte's hair. Back then, Nathaniel used to say, "I don't need a kingdom, just you." He meant it. At least, she thought he did. As his net worth multiplied, their world changed. First came the penthouse, then the driver, then the yacht. The Nathaniel who once obsessed over pixel errors on his website now argued over watch brands and charity galas. He started skipping dinners, then holidays, then weekends. Charlotte adjusted, or tried to. She hosted. She smiled. She nodded politely when investors' wives made comments about her lack of couture. She took etiquette lessons just to survive brunches with fashion house executives. But beneath the gloss, she felt herself fading. There was a time when she could walk into any room and be heard. Now, people saw her as the wife, background noise, a placeholder beside a man who was supposed to have outgrown her. Still, she stayed. Why? Because they were trying for a baby. It was the one thing they had promised each other before the world became too loud. They'd had losses, 2 miscarriages in 4 years. Each one quietly mourned behind blackout curtains and hospital doors. Each one tearing a little more from Charlotte's already fragile soul. When she got pregnant for the 3rd time, she didn't tell Nathaniel right away. She waited for the perfect night. He never came home that night. He was in Monaco with Cassia. Charlotte first saw the rumors on a fashion blog. Nathaniel photographed stepping out of a Bentley with Cassia Fairchild, gown-clad, laughing, her hand on his chest. The photos meant nothing, she told herself. Just press noise. But then came the tabloid features, the airport sightings, a leaked restaurant receipt from Capri. And still, nothing from Nathaniel, no call, no explanation. Just silence, her heart shattered in quiet pieces. She hadn't even told him yet, about the baby, about the 3rd chance they never expected. She had bought little socks, planned a reveal. She was going to surprise him after the Paris conference. He never came back from Paris. Instead, she got a manila envelope, filed by Nathaniel Carrington. Grounds, irreconcilable differences, no signature, just his lawyers. No warning. No confrontation, just erasure. Charlotte didn't fight it. She let the papers sit on the counter for weeks. She cried, threw up from the stress, and then she signed. But she didn't tell him. She didn't tell him about the child. Because she wanted the baby to have a mother who wasn't begging for love. Because she realized, if Nathaniel could leave without asking, he didn't deserve to know. That night, after the collapse at the wedding, Charlotte lay in a private hospital room. A nurse stood over her, checking monitors, adjusting IVs. The baby was stable. Her vitals were improving. But her hands still shook. The door creaked open. She turned. Nathaniel stood in the doorway, disheveled, confused. Still wearing his wedding tux, but the boutonniere was gone. His tie loosened, his eyes tired. He stepped in slowly. "I didn't know," he said softly. "No," she replied, voice barely above a whisper. "You didn't ask." He swallowed hard. "Is it mine?" Charlotte didn't answer. "Not yet. Why didn't you tell me?" Her eyes met his, cold, still, but not weak. "Because you were already gone, and I wanted our child to grow up knowing their mother didn't beg a man to stay." Silence. Nathaniel sat down across from her. His hands trembled. He looked like a boy, not the billionaire mogul he had become. "I made a mistake." "No," Charlotte corrected. "You made choices, and so did I." She turned her head toward the window, toward the skyline she once knew like a heartbeat. He sat in silence, unsure what to say. But one thing was clear. Charlotte Bennett wasn't the forgotten bride anymore. She was rising, and this time, she wasn't looking back. Cassia Fairchild had always known how to command attention. At 29, she had built a global brand around her name. Luxury skincare, fashion collabs, motivational speaking. She was the girl who turned Instagram followers into millions, who posed beside yachts, champagne, and museum-grade lighting. She didn't beg for relevance. She built it. But that night, as she stood frozen at the altar in her 1,000-thread-count wedding gown, cameras still pointed her way, but not for the reason she'd planned. They weren't capturing her glow or the designer pearl-embellished veil flowing behind her. They were filming her replacement collapsing in the middle of her dream. And the worst part? Cassia hadn't known the woman was pregnant, or Nathaniel's ex-wife. Not until the murmurs reached her ears and the whispers turned into stares. "Is that Charlotte?" someone said near the champagne bar. "Is she pregnant?" "No way. Is it his?" Cassia had heard it all. Every syllable felt like acid trickling down her spine. She didn't cry, not yet. She stood there, fists clenched beneath layers of silk and tulle, as Nathaniel walked away from her, down the aisle, toward a woman she was promised he had nothing left for. "Cassia," someone from her PR team whispered, "we should escort you out. This is going to get messy." "No," she snapped. "Let them look." Her tone was sharp, controlled, but her insides burned like a wildfire. This wasn't just a personal betrayal. This was public. This was viral. And in her world, perception was everything. That night, hours after the wedding was officially postponed, the hashtags began trending. #CarringtonChaos, pregnant at the altar, Charlotte returns, billionaire bride backlash. Clips of Charlotte fainting played in slow motion across every social platform. Gossip channels jumped on it. YouTubers speculated timelines. TikTok detectives pulled up old photos of Charlotte and Nathaniel together, contrasting them with the curated posts Cassia had uploaded just days earlier. Someone even found the ultrasound pic Charlotte had posted on a private Facebook account, blurry, dated 6 weeks after her separation from Nathaniel. The math added up. It was his baby. And Cassia? She was trending for all the wrong reasons. Imagine getting married and the groom leaves mid-vow for his pregnant ex. She spent $80,000 on a gown just to be upstaged by a Target maternity dress. Girl, this isn't a wedding, it's a telenovela. She watched the comments pour in from the penthouse suite of the Langford Hotel, still wearing the remains of her dress, now crumpled around her like an expensive lie. Her makeup smeared, her hair undone. The bottle of vintage Moet she'd planned to open with Nathaniel sat unopened on the vanity. Her phone buzzed nonstop. Her agent, her stylist, her assistant, her brand partners, everyone wanted an explanation, or distance. Cassia flung the phone across the room. The next morning, she did what she always did when the world tried to shame her. She fought back. She posted a simple selfie. Hair wrapped in a towel, makeup wiped clean, eyes locked with the camera like a loaded weapon. The caption, "I don't lose, I evolve." Within minutes, comments flooded in. Supporters rallied behind her. Brands commented heart emojis. Influencer friends posted supportive reels, but none of it dulled the ache inside her. Because Cassia had one rule in life. Don't be the girl left behind. And that's exactly what Nathaniel had made her. 2 days passed. Nathaniel still hadn't returned to their suite. She told the concierge to block his keycard, told the doorman she was resting. But inside, she was plotting. On the third day, she called her team. I want every interview slot this week, she said. Podcast, press, live stream. I don't care. I want airtime. We're flipping the narrative. Cass, I don't know if that's a good... You don't pay me to play safe, she snapped. You pay me to win. So she sat under ring lights, sipped lemon water, and told the world how blindsided she was. How she didn't know about the baby. How she had supported Nathaniel through his darkest days. I loved him, and I thought he loved me, she said, tears welling perfectly. But sometimes people carry baggage you can't unpack. The interviews went viral, fans flooded in. Sympathy surged. New followers poured into her DMs. She was back on top, but beneath the filters and viral reels, something inside her cracked. Because for the first time in her career, Cassia Fairchild wasn't in control of the script, and it terrified her. Meanwhile, Charlotte was watching. From a modest rental apartment on the west side with a heating pad on her back and her swollen feet propped up, she watched the woman who replaced her spin tragedy into content. It didn't anger her, not anymore. She had other things to focus on, like her next ultrasound, her nutrition plan, her new job offers, because suddenly her inbox was full of them. Brands wanted her, people sympathized. Former colleagues reached out. Charlotte Bennett was no longer invisible. She was a story, and people loved a story. Still, she didn't post. She didn't tweet. She didn't defend or explain, because silence wasn't weakness anymore. It was power, and she knew Cassia wasn't finished. Not yet. Sure enough, just 1 week later, Cassia appeared on the Valeria Grace Show, a daytime talk show watched by millions. Hair sleek, dress immaculate, voice steady. Valeria leaned in. So Cassia, if Nathaniel came to you now and said he wanted to fix things, would you take him back? Cassia's smile didn't waver, but her eyes were glass. No, she said. Because when someone leaves you for a secret they never confessed, they're not choosing freedom, they're choosing fear. And I don't build futures on fear. The audience applauded. The clip went viral. But as the credits rolled, Cassia's hands trembled beneath the table. Because deep down, she wasn't sure she meant it. For a woman who had been publicly discarded, Charlotte Bennett was surprisingly composed. She sat quietly in the corner booth of a quiet bistro in Tribeca, sipping chamomile tea while the world buzzed around her. News vans still camped outside her building. Journalists angled for quotes. Drones had hovered near her windows just the day before. But Charlotte didn't panic. She waited. Because today, someone important was meeting her. Someone who knew Nathaniel Carrington's world from the inside. Someone who had once warned her, gently, discreetly, not to trust the man she had loved. And now he was coming out of the shadows. The door chimed. She looked up. Elias Rourke. Tall. Disarmingly calm. The kind of man who didn't need to raise his voice to get attention. He wore a navy wool coat over a fitted suit, but what stood out most were his eyes, steel gray and unreadable. He spotted her immediately and crossed the room without hesitation. Charlotte, he greeted, his voice smooth. You look stronger. I feel stronger, she said, offering a small smile. Thanks for coming. I should have come a lot sooner, Elias replied as he sat across from her. I was in Tokyo when it happened. The wedding, the collapse. I watched it unfold in real time. Couldn't believe he walked away from the altar. Charlotte raised an eyebrow. Believe it. He's good at walking away. Elias nodded. I was at Synchrospace before it was Synchrospace, remember? Back when Nathaniel thought converting his closet into a server room was visionary. I saw the rise and the rot. That was why Charlotte trusted him. He wasn't just Nathaniel's former COO, he had been there since day one. Elias had quietly stepped down 2 years ago, citing creative differences, though everyone in tech knew it was more than that. Now, he was building his own company, privately funded, no PR fluff, no scandal. He slid a file across the table. There's something you need to see. Charlotte hesitated before opening it. Inside were printed emails, flight logs, financial transfers, and photos. Photos of Cassia, with a man who was not Nathaniel. Who is this? Charlotte whispered. Lucian Maddox, Elias replied. Swiss venture capitalist, allegedly backed Cassia's beauty line. Also, allegedly, a little more. Charlotte flipped through more pages. Are you telling me she was using Nathaniel? Elias gave a dry smile. I'm telling you she's not as heartbroken as she wants the world to believe. She wanted Carrington's name, not Carrington's love. And now that it's blowing up, She's already diversifying. Why show me this? Charlotte asked. Why now? Elias leaned forward. Because I know what it feels like to build something with Nathaniel, and I know what it feels like to be erased from the narrative. You weren't just his wife, Charlotte. You were his anchor. And I think it's time you stop letting him dictate the story. Charlotte studied him. You want me to fight back? I want you to win, Elias said simply. I have the resources, the strategy, and believe me, the tech world loves a redemption arc, especially when the underdog is smarter, tougher, and pregnant with the heir to Carrington's empire. Charlotte blinked. I'm not interested in revenge. I didn't say revenge, Elias replied. I said power. You can own this, not as the ex-wife, not as the victim, as the force. For a moment, Charlotte stayed silent. Then she carefully placed the file back on the table. What exactly do you have in mind? 1 week later, Charlotte went live. No press release, no stylists, just a simple video. She sat in front of a plain white wall, wearing a soft blue blouse, no makeup, hair pulled back in a low bun. Hi, she began softly. You all know me as the woman who collapsed at a wedding. She paused, but that's not all I am. Over the next 6 minutes, she told her story. Honestly, gently, without bitterness. She didn't name Nathaniel. She didn't accuse Cassia. She just spoke about loving someone who changed, about being left while pregnant, about finding strength when the world watched her fall, and about choosing to stand up, not for the cameras, but for herself. Within 2 hours, the video had 2 million views. Within 12, 10 million. Within 24, Charlotte Bennett was the top trending name in America. She didn't need to cry or scream. She told the truth, and the truth shook people to their core. Cassia watched the video from a hotel suite in Dubai. Her new campaign shoot had been canceled last minute. Brand conflict, her agent said. As she scrolled through Charlotte's video, her jaw tightened. Because it wasn't just vulnerability, it was strategy. And it was working. Every like, every retweet, every comment that praised Charlotte for her grace and resilience made Cassia feel like her world was tilting. She threw her phone on the bed and poured herself a drink. This isn't over, she whispered to no one. And it wasn't. Not by a long shot. Meanwhile, Nathaniel stood in his office, watching the same video in silence. The sun was setting behind him, casting long shadows across the floor-to-ceiling windows of his 57th Street headquarters. He had rewatched the clip 5 times already. Every time Charlotte said the words, "I found my voice again," his stomach turned. Not from anger, from regret. Because now he saw her not as the woman he left, but as the woman he lost. His phone buzzed. Another missed call from Cassia. He ignored it. Then buzzed again. This time from a blocked number. He answered. A voice said only this. You should be careful what you underestimate, Mr. Carrington. Charlotte isn't the same woman you walked away from, and this time, she's not alone. The call ended. Nathaniel froze. Because he recognized that voice. Elias Rourke. The cameras flashed, but this time Charlotte didn't flinch. She stepped onto the crimson carpet of the Apex Tech Gala with a presence that silenced the room. Gone were the days of simple cardigans and quiet corners. Gone was the woman who waited in the shadows for someone else to make space for her. Tonight, she owned the spotlight. A deep emerald gown hugged her figure, custom designed to accommodate her 7-month pregnancy. The neckline was bold but elegant, the sleeves sculpted. Her hair flowed in soft waves down her back, and her makeup, soft but intentional, highlighted the strength in her eyes. She didn't walk the carpet alone. Elias Rourke walked beside her, tall, polished, unapologetically protective. Whispers flew. Is that her? That's Charlotte Bennett? She looks. Wow. She brought Elias Rourke? What is going on? The Apex Tech Gala was the Super Bowl of innovation. Every investor, founder, and VC worth their salt attended. Charlotte hadn't just shown up. She had taken the stage. Just weeks ago, she'd been dismissed as a fallen ex-wife. Now, she was a player. No, scratch that. She was a threat. 2 hours earlier, Charlotte had stood before a mirror in Elias's downtown penthouse. I don't know if I can pull this off, she said quietly. Elias adjusted his cufflinks and stepped beside her. Charlotte, you pulled off loving a man who never deserved you and walking away without burning the world down. You can do this. She looked at her reflection. The dress, the heels, the bump that reminded her every day why she had to keep going. She exhaled slowly. Okay? Elias offered his arm. Let's make them remember who you are. Inside the gala, conversations stopped when Charlotte entered the ballroom. Investors turned, executives did double takes. Even the Apex CEO, Nolan Burns, walked away mid-sentence just to greet her. "Miss Bennett," he said with a smile, "you look formidable." "Thank you, Nolan," she replied calmly. "It's been a long time." "Not too long, I hope. I hear you're back in the game?" Elias chimed in smoothly. "She's not just back, she's leading." "Ah," Nolan nodded. "So it's true, you're launching?" Charlotte's smile didn't waver. "Watch the headlines tomorrow." That was all she said before moving on, leaving Nolan stunned. It wasn't just small talk, it was a warning. Because Charlotte was launching. She and Elias had spent the past few weeks quietly assembling a dream team. Engineers, designers, data scientists, all people who had once left Synchrospace out of frustration with Nathaniel's ego. The new startup? Thrive. A women-led platform focused on data-driven mental health tools for expectant mothers. Mobile-first, AI-backed, secure, scalable, and unapologetically Charlotte's. They hadn't taken any funding yet, because they didn't need it. Elias had already seeded $8 million of his own capital, and the moment the teaser site went live, featuring Charlotte, her story, and her mission, interest exploded. Venture capitalists flooded Elias's inbox, but they weren't in a rush. They were planning something bigger. Charlotte didn't just want back in the industry, she wanted to reshape it. As the night continued, Charlotte gave one brief interview to a journalist from Tech Pulse. "No comment on the wedding?" the reporter asked. Charlotte shook her head. "That chapter is closed." "And Cassia Fairchild? Any message?" Charlotte smiled. "I wish her well." The reporter blinked. "That's all?" Charlotte turned slightly toward the camera. "No matter how people try to write your story, you always have the right to pick up the pen. That's what I'm doing now." It was the quote that would go viral. Somewhere across town, in a loft filled with half-unpacked boxes and makeup kits, Cassia stared at her phone. The interview clip played on loop. The world was eating it up. They loved Charlotte's elegance, her serenity, her strength, and worst of all, they believed it. Cassia had done everything to control the narrative, but now, she wasn't trending. Charlotte was. She picked up her phone and dialed a number she'd promised herself she wouldn't call again. "Nate," she said when he answered. "We need to talk." He exhaled. "Cassia, I'm losing everything," she snapped. "Sponsors, followers, campaigns. People think I'm the villain and she's Mother Teresa." She didn't ask for the spotlight. "No, but she owns it now," Cassia hissed. "Do you understand what that means?" Nathaniel was quiet. Cassia's voice dropped. "If you don't do something soon, you won't just lose your company, you'll lose your legacy." He rubbed his forehead, because deep down, he knew she was right. Charlotte wasn't just reclaiming her name, she was replacing his. Back at the gala, as Charlotte stood beneath a crystal chandelier, a young woman approached her. "Miss Bennett," she said nervously, "I just wanted to say thank you for speaking out, for showing up. I'm 5 months along and I've never felt more alone, but seeing you tonight, it made me feel seen." Charlotte's heart softened. She gently placed a hand on the woman's arm. "You're not alone," she said. "Not anymore." Elias watched the exchange from a few feet away, and in that moment he knew Charlotte wasn't just building a company, she was building a movement. Later that night, as they rode back in a sleek black town car, Charlotte rested her hand on her belly. "You were incredible tonight," Elias said quietly. She smiled, tired but proud. "I didn't think I'd make it this far," she murmured. "You haven't even started," he replied. And she knew he was right. This wasn't a comeback. It was a reintroduction. Charlotte Bennett wasn't just back. She was becoming something even Nathaniel couldn't predict. And in the days to come, the entire industry would learn, never underestimate the woman you left behind. Especially when she rises holding the future in her hands. It happened just past noon, on a Wednesday that smelled like rain. Charlotte had just stepped out of a prenatal yoga class, her body sore but her mind unusually calm. She wore leggings, a loose cardigan, and a pair of oversized sunglasses to shield herself from the occasional photographer that still lingered near her apartment complex. She wasn't expecting a black SUV to be idling by the curb, and she definitely wasn't expecting Cassia Fairchild to step out of it. In heels. In Chanel. Like it was just another red carpet. Charlotte stopped cold. Cassia's lipstick was flawless, her hair pulled back into a sleek bun. She didn't look like a woman unraveling from lost endorsements and bad headlines. She looked like a predator. And today she was hunting. "We need to talk," Cassia said simply. Charlotte's first instinct was to walk away. But something in Cassia's tone, measured, almost calculated, made her pause. After a long silence, Charlotte replied, "Say what you came to say, but make it quick." Cassia nodded toward the SUV. "Get in, it's soundproofed." Charlotte hesitated. Every bone in her body told her not to go. But curiosity, sharp, dangerous, pushed her forward. She climbed in. The door shut with a soft click. Inside was cool leather, soft lighting, and an unmistakable tension that thickened the air like fog. Cassia didn't waste time. "I know what you're doing." Charlotte raised an eyebrow. "And what's that exactly?" Cassia leaned in slightly. "You're building a revenge arc, dressing it up as empowerment, and I'll admit, it's smart. You're playing it slow, classy, emotional, but don't think for 1 second I don't see the playbook." "I'm not playing anything," Charlotte replied coolly. "I'm just telling the truth." Cassia smirked. "Right, and that gala? That was just a peaceful stroll down memory lane?" Charlotte folded her hands over her belly. "You wanted the spotlight? Now that someone else has it, you're panicking." Cassia's smile faltered, just a flicker. Then she leaned back, crossed her legs, and delivered her line like a bullet. "I want to make you an offer." Charlotte didn't flinch. "I'm not interested in money, Cassia." "Oh, I know," she said, waving a hand. "You've got Elias, you've got your startup, you've got sympathy and a baby and a glow that makes you look like Mother Earth meets Oprah. But what you don't have is peace." Charlotte tilted her head. "Meaning?" "Meaning," Cassia said slowly. "You have no idea what Nathaniel is capable of when he's cornered. You think this ends with some startup funding and public praise? You're threatening his legacy. And I promise you, he's preparing a counterstrike. NDAs. Lawsuits. He'll dig into your past, your financials, even your medical records." Charlotte narrowed her eyes. "I've done nothing wrong." Cassia sighed. "That's never stopped him before." A long silence passed between them. Then Cassia reached into her handbag and pulled out a folder. "I have emails, screenshots, conversations I was never supposed to see. Proof that Nathaniel manipulated investors, buried sexual harassment claims, lied to regulators." She held the folder out. Charlotte didn't move. "Why are you giving this to me?" she asked cautiously. Cassia's tone dropped to a whisper. "Because he used both of us. And if he's going down, I want front row seats." Charlotte stared at her. For the first time, Cassia didn't look like the villain. She looked like a woman who had realized far too late that she'd been a pawn in a game she thought she controlled. "I'll take it," Charlotte said finally. "But not because I want revenge." Cassia laughed softly. "Of course not." Charlotte took the folder. "And for the record," she added, "this baby, this isn't a weapon. This is my future, and I won't let either of you corrupt it." Cassia didn't reply, but as Charlotte opened the car door and stepped into the drizzling street, she glanced back just once, and for the first time since the wedding, she saw something in Cassia's eyes that almost resembled respect. Later that night, Elias flipped through the folder. His jaw tightened. "This is bad. If this gets out—" "It won't," Charlotte said. "Not yet." They sat in Elias's office, the skyline glowing behind them like a stage set. "I don't want to destroy him," Charlotte said, "but I will defend myself." Elias nodded. "Then we need to prepare." Charlotte leaned back in the leather chair, her hand resting gently on her stomach. For months, she had reacted to what others did. Now she was setting the tempo, and it felt terrifyingly good. Across the city, Nathaniel Carrington stood in his boardroom, surrounded by lawyers. The documents Cassia leaked were being tracked. They knew someone had broken protocol. What they didn't know yet was that Charlotte had them. He stared out the window, hands clenched behind his back. She was no longer silent. She was no longer soft. And the more he tried to control the narrative, the more the world seemed to favor her version of it. "Sir?" his legal counsel asked. "How should we proceed?" Nathaniel didn't answer right away. He just whispered, "We go on the offensive." The next morning, Charlotte received a cease and desist letter. It accused her of slander, breach of privacy, and attempting to cause reputational harm to Mr. Carrington and his company. She read it once. Then she smiled, because that meant one thing: he was scared, and fear meant she was winning. The moment Charlotte clicked upload, there was no going back. The screen blinked, the progress bar turned green, and just like that, the truth was live. She sat in her modest home office, nothing flashy, just a clean white backdrop and soft lighting, and stared at the video's thumbnail now sitting at the top of her new YouTube channel. It wasn't clickbait. It wasn't drama. It was titled simply, "The Truth About My Marriage to Nathaniel Carrington." No tears, no theatrics, just truth, and within 10 minutes, it was trending. "Let me be clear," her voice opened softly. "This isn't about revenge. It's about accountability." She sat tall, her hands folded gently on the desk, her baby bump visible beneath a powder blue blouse. "I was married to a man who built an empire while quietly breaking the people around him. I stayed silent for a long time because I thought protecting him meant protecting the child we created together." She paused, her eyes unwavering. But silence only ever protects the wrong people. Charlotte laid it out. Not all the details, not everything, just enough. How Nathaniel ghosted her during pregnancy, how he filed for divorce without a conversation, how his current image of success was built on the backs of employees who were silenced, pushed out, or buried under NDAs. She didn't drag Cassia. In fact, she didn't even name her, and she didn't cry, not once. Because this time, Charlotte wasn't broken, she was in control, and the world noticed. By the next morning, the video had over 14 million views. News outlets picked it up. #Carrington cover-up trended globally. Op-eds exploded. The New York Times wrote, "What happens when the ex-wife refuses to disappear?" Forbes titled their piece, "Charlotte Bennett isn't just speaking up, she's leading." And social media, it exploded with praise. She didn't just tell her truth, she brought receipts. "I'd vote for Charlotte for president, honestly. This is how you take down a narcissist, with calm facts and full poise." But it wasn't just public opinion shifting. Private conversations were unraveling too. Because with that one video, Charlotte gave something dangerous to a lot of people Nathaniel had wronged: permission. 2 days later, a former Synchrospace engineer anonymously posted her NDA agreement on Twitter. Redacted, but damning. Then another woman came forward, then a contractor, then a former intern. Stories poured in about unethical business practices, unpaid overtime, harassment swept under the rug. The SEC launched an inquiry within 48 hours. Suddenly, Charlotte Bennett wasn't just the ex-wife who spoke up. She was the spark of a reckoning. Nathaniel watched it all unfold from his penthouse. His lawyers paced, his PR manager quit, he yelled at the TV, through his phone, demanded statements, threatened lawsuits. But no matter what he did, the damage grew. Every time he issued a denial, someone else shared proof. He tried to smear Charlotte, leaked stories to gossip outlets about her being unstable, emotionally erratic, unfit to lead a company. But it backfired. People saw through it. Especially women. Especially mothers. Every smear made her stronger. Because now, she wasn't just Charlotte. She was every woman who had been erased and told to smile about it. At Thrive headquarters, a small but growing loft office in Brooklyn, Charlotte watched the news coverage with her team. They'd just finalized their product prototype. Beta testing was scheduled for the next month. Press interest had tripled since the video went live. Elias stood behind her chair, reading aloud from a TechCrunch article. Thrive? A startup born from strength, not scandal. Charlotte exhaled. "We need to stay focused," she said. "We're not building this to spite anyone. We're building this for us, for women who are scared, for moms who feel invisible, for anyone who's ever been gaslit and told they're imagining it." Her lead developer, a soft-spoken woman named Priya, nodded. "We're ready. Let's get this live." Elias smiled, proud. But behind his eyes, something else stirred. He knew Nathaniel wouldn't go quietly. And he was right. That night, Charlotte received an envelope, hand-delivered, no return address. Inside was a single-typed message. "If you release any more footage, the next headline won't be about your company, it'll be about your child." No name, no signature, but Charlotte knew exactly who sent it. Her hand trembled, not from fear, from fury, because now he was trying to use the one thing she loved most as a weapon. And that was the final mistake he would ever make. The next day, Charlotte walked into a CBS studio in Midtown for a live sit-down interview. No teleprompters, no pre-approved questions, just her, a mic, and millions watching. The host smiled gently. "Charlotte, this video has sparked a global movement, but today we're hearing that Carrington Holdings is preparing to sue you. Are you afraid? Charlotte's gaze didn't blink. I'm not afraid, she said. The host leaned in. Even with threats coming to your home? Charlotte's voice didn't shake. When someone uses fear to keep you quiet, you speak louder. And I'm going to keep speaking, because I'm not just doing this for me. She glanced briefly off camera, where Elias stood, nodding. I'm doing it for my child, so they grow up in a world where strength doesn't come from silence, but from truth. The audience clapped. Somewhere in the control room, a producer whispered, "We're looking at the next Oprah." By the time the interview ended, Charlotte's team had installed security around her building. Thrive's waitlist reached 300,000 users. And Nathaniel? He finally got the call he'd been dreading, from his board of directors. "We're asking you to step down," they said. He fought, he yelled, he threatened, but it was over. Charlotte didn't just take back her story, she ended his. The morning of the launch felt like the calm before a storm, except Charlotte Bennett wasn't afraid of storms anymore. She stood at the edge of Thrive's modest Brooklyn office, watching her team scramble with last-minute checks, server loads, user queues, media calls. She could feel the buzz humming through the walls. Everyone moved with purpose, with urgency, with the quiet excitement of people who knew they were on the verge of something historic. Elias approached, phone in hand. "We're 5 minutes out." Charlotte nodded. "And the waitlist?" He smiled. "Over 1.1 million. She raised an eyebrow. "We only projected 400,000 by launch day." "Well," Elias replied, "it turns out women relate to a platform built by someone who actually listens." Charlotte exhaled. Her fingers rubbed against the ring she no longer wore. The past months flashed through her mind. The betrayal, the collapse, the spotlight, the threats, and now, this. Not a comeback. A beginning. "Let's go live," she said. At exactly 9 a.m. EST, Thrive launched. Within seconds, traffic surged. Their server team had prepared for spikes, but not like this. The user dashboard blinked in real time. 10,000, 50,000, 120,000, and climbing. News outlets had pre-written headlines, but even they weren't ready. TechCrunch, Charlotte Bennett's Thrive app launches with record-breaking demand. Wired, move over calm. There's a new leader in women's wellness. Forbes, from betrayed to billion-dollar visionary, Charlotte Bennett changes the game. But numbers were just the beginning. What mattered was the mission. Thrive wasn't just another wellness app. It was a lifeline, custom tools for pregnancy and postpartum mental health, AI-assisted journaling, guided meditations, access to trauma-informed counselors, real-time community forums, built by women. For women, no filters, no fluff, just healing. By noon, their Instagram went from 80K to 2.6 million followers. By 3 p.m., Apple featured Thrive as App of the Day. By 5 p.m., every major podcast and talk show requested interviews. But Charlotte didn't bask in the attention. She stayed in the war room, headset on, helping triage onboarding bugs, writing real-time thank you messages to early users, making sure every mother logging in felt seen. Because she remembered what it felt like to be invisible. To cry on cold bathroom tiles while the world moved on, to hold joy and grief in the same heartbeat. This was never about Nathaniel, or Cassia, or headlines. This was about rewriting the story after the fall. Meanwhile, Nathaniel watched from the shadows. The board had removed him from Synchrospace just 48 hours earlier. His reputation? Shattered. His brand? Boycotted. His inbox? Radioactive. He sat alone in a penthouse he no longer owned, his legal team negotiating asset freezes while shareholders scrambled for damage control. But none of that hurt as much as her success. Not because Charlotte succeeded, but because she didn't need him to do it. And now the world didn't ask about Nathaniel Carrington. They asked about Charlotte Bennett. In Dubai, Cassia scrolled through her feed. Every headline, every reel, every trending hashtag had Charlotte's face. Cassia's own partnerships had slowed to a trickle. Campaigns postponed, her skincare line quietly dissolved. But surprisingly, she didn't feel rage. She felt relieved, because now the cameras had turned elsewhere, and for once she could breathe. She posted a story that night. A quiet photo of the ocean, no caption. And for the first time since the wedding, no one dissected it. She wasn't the main character anymore. And maybe that was okay. Back in Brooklyn, Charlotte stood in the center of her team as the official user count crossed 2 million. Applause erupted, confetti popped, someone cried. Elias raised a glass of sparkling cider. To Charlotte, he said, voice steady, for turning pain into purpose, and for reminding us all there's no limit to what a woman can build when she's no longer silenced. Everyone cheered. But Charlotte stepped forward, raising her own glass with a quiet smile. This isn't about me, she said. This is about us, every woman who's ever been told to sit down, shut up, or smile through it. We're not doing that anymore. A pause. From now on, we rise. Later that night, Charlotte returned home to a stack of letters at her door. Handwritten notes. Mothers, daughters, even husbands. One read, I watched my wife struggle through postpartum depression for years. We didn't have a thrive. Thank you for making sure others do. Another said, your strength gave me permission to leave a toxic marriage. My baby and I are finally safe. And another, you reminded me that I still matter, even when I feel broken. Charlotte sat on her couch, hand on her belly, tears falling silently. This was it. This was the legacy. Not headlines, not stock valuations, but impact. Across town, a private investor meeting buzzed. Every firm wanted in. Thrive had refused VC money early, but now? The offers were historic. $50 million for 10%, $100 million for 15%, a full acquisition proposal from a legacy tech brand. But Elias took every call with the same answer. She's not selling. Not now. Not ever. Because Charlotte hadn't built a product, she had built power. And that kind of power doesn't go up for auction. The next morning, as Charlotte walked into the Thrive office, a crowd waited outside. Not paparazzi. Users. Mothers, teen girls, elderly women, some with babies in slings, others holding signs that said, Thank you, Charlotte. She paused, stunned. A young girl, no older than 16, stepped forward. I just wanted you to know, she said, trembling slightly, you changed my mom's life. And probably saved mine too. Charlotte knelt, hugged her, and whispered, You're why we do this. Nathaniel Carrington had always believed two things. He was irreplaceable. People had short memories. But standing in front of the press, sweat clinging to the collar of his designer shirt, he realized both beliefs had finally betrayed him. The cameras flashed, microphones extended toward his face like weapons. His once commanding voice trembled as he stepped behind the podium, blinking under the relentless lights. The backdrop behind him read Synchrospace Emergency Press Conference. No logos, no slogans, just white. Empty, but like everything he'd once built. The week leading up to this moment had been a landslide. After Charlotte's viral video and the Thrive launch, Synchrospace's stock tanked. Investors pulled out. Regulatory bodies launched formal investigations. Former employees began testifying. The board had removed Nathaniel in a unanimous vote, but the damage kept bleeding out. Then came the leak. Not from Charlotte. Not from Cassia, from within. A junior PR associate leaked a 26-page internal memo detailing years of buried misconduct, illegal lobbying tactics, falsified data reports to shareholders. The memo went global within hours. Nathaniel had no choice but to speak. Even his legal team warned, either you address this publicly or we walk. So here he stood, naked in everything but a suit. He cleared his throat. Good morning. I want to begin by saying I take full responsibility for the missteps that occurred under my leadership. He paused. No applause, no sympathy, only silence. And I want to sincerely apologize to those who were impacted, employees, stakeholders, and most of all, the public who trusted me. It was the first time he'd said sorry, without an attorney present, and it sounded hollow, because everyone knew he wasn't here to take accountability. He was here to stop the bleeding, but it was far too late. Halfway through the statement, a protest erupted outside the building. Dozens of women, former Synchrospace employees, Charlotte's supporters, everyday mothers who had downloaded Thrive, chanted his name in fury. Carrington knew. Justice for Charlotte. We don't forget. Reporters turned to look. Security rushed toward the glass doors. Nathaniel hesitated, his voice cracked as he tried to continue, but the noise, the anger, cut through everything. He looked down at the statement. The words blurred. For the first time in his adult life, he was speechless. Meanwhile, across town, Charlotte sat in a quiet conference room, Thrive's legal team reviewing contracts. Elias had warned her not to watch the press conference. Let it burn, he said. Don't give it your energy. But she watched anyway, not out of spite, out of closure. She saw him tremble. She saw him sweat. She saw the man who once boasted that he built his kingdom from nothing, now struggled to string a sentence together. And she felt Nothing, no pity, no satisfaction, just release. This wasn't revenge, this was balance. The scales finally correcting themselves. Cassia watched too, from a quiet resort in the Maldives. She sat on a balcony in a simple robe, no makeup, a journal in her lap. She didn't cheer, she didn't smirk. She just closed her laptop, set it aside, and whispered, "Finally." Then she dipped her toes into the warm pool and let the past drift away. After the press conference, Nathaniel didn't return to his penthouse. He didn't call anyone. He didn't even check the news. He just wandered. Downtown. Through the streets of the city he used to dominate, people stared, whispered. Some filmed him. But no one stopped to shake his hand. The fall wasn't dramatic. It wasn't fiery. It was quiet, lonely. Exactly how he had left Charlotte. He ended up in a bar. Not one of the luxury ones he used to frequent. A dive. Dimly lit. Half empty. He ordered a whiskey. Neat. The bartender raised an eyebrow. "Rough day?" Nathaniel laughed bitterly. "You could say that. You want the tab now or after the second drink?" He hesitated, then pulled out a black Amex. The bartender took it. Swiped. Declined. Nathaniel stared. Swiped again. Declined. He reached for his wallet. Nothing. It hit him then. Not just the scandal. Not just the headlines, but the irrelevance. He was nobody now. Not because of Charlotte, because of himself. He'd burned every bridge, and now he had no idea how to rebuild. The next morning, a single news article made front-page headlines worldwide. Nathaniel Carrington resigns from public life. Crisis manager confirms he will not be returning to tech or media. No quotes, no spin, just silence. Charlotte sipped her tea in the Thrive Lounge, reading it on her tablet. She didn't smile, she didn't react, she simply turned to the next document. A grant proposal to expand Thrive's reach to underserved countries. There was work to do. The future had already begun. A week later, a letter arrived. Handwritten, no return address. Inside was a single page. The handwriting was unmistakable. "Charlotte, you were always better than me. You were always right. I was too proud to see it, too weak to admit it. You didn't just survive me. You became something I'll never be. Tell our child I'm sorry." She folded the letter slowly, then placed it in a drawer, not to keep his memory alive, but to remind herself of everything she would never allow again. The auditorium lights dimmed, silence fell over the crowd of nearly 2,000, then a spotlight beamed down. Charlotte Bennett stepped onto the stage, no longer just a woman with a past, but a symbol of power, purpose, and perseverance. The applause erupted before she even spoke. Tonight wasn't a gala. It wasn't a launch. It wasn't a press stunt. It was her keynote address at the Global Women's Impact Summit, and she was the closing speaker, the final voice, the one the world had come to hear. Charlotte walked with calm assurance, her pregnant belly no longer something to hide, but something she carried with visible pride. She approached the podium, smiled, and waited until the room quieted. Then she began. "I used to believe I had to earn my voice." Her tone was gentle but strong, that I had to be small enough to make others comfortable, that I had to be polite in pain, silent in betrayal, graceful in chaos. A pause. Not anymore. The audience leaned in, hanging on every word. "I want to tell you a story. Not about the collapse of a marriage, or a tech scandal, or a viral headline, but about resilience, about what it means to begin again when the world thinks you're finished." She paced slightly, hands relaxed at her sides. "When I stood at my ex-husband's wedding and collapsed, I thought that was the end of my story. But it was the beginning of yours." She looked out at the audience. "You, every woman watching, every mother who felt invisible, every daughter who was told to sit still and smile, every survivor who walked through fire and was told she should be thankful for the heat." Applause rippled across the auditorium. "I didn't rise because I was stronger than you. I rose because I remembered who I was, and because I had people who believed in me when I forgot how to believe in myself." Her voice cracked slightly, then steadied. "And today, I stand here, not as someone who got even, but as someone who got clear." A beat passed. "You can lose everything, your title, your partner, your stability, even your name in the media, but if you keep your integrity, they can't take that from you." The audience rose to their feet. Applause thundered. But Charlotte held up her hand gently. "I'm not finished." Laughter. The crowd settled again. "This isn't just about what I built. It's about why I built it." Charlotte began showing slides, photos of Thrive's impact, postpartum clinics partnering with the platform, mental health tools saving lives, underserved communities receiving mobile units. This year alone, we've reached 3.6 million women in over 40 countries. That's not a brand, that's a movement. She smiled softly, and we're just getting started. Then the final slide faded in. A photo of Charlotte holding her newborn son, his tiny hand wrapped around her finger. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Her voice lowered. He was born 3 weeks early. I went into labor after a night shift at the office, building a tool for single mothers. I held him, and I knew, this is the legacy. Not code, not valuations, not headlines, but hope. Elsewhere in the crowd, Cassia Fairchild sat quietly in the back row. Disguised in a beige cap and no makeup, she had snuck in unnoticed. But she didn't need to be seen. She just needed to witness it. And for the first time in years, she felt something unexpected: peace. Because despite the scandals, the backlash, the internet dragging her name through the dirt, she saw now that Charlotte hadn't destroyed her. She had freed her. Cassia would build again, but this time, not on someone else's name. After the speech, media outlets flooded the web with praise. Time magazine: Charlotte Bennett defines the future of leadership. CNN: from collapse to conqueror, Bennett's speech draws global standing ovation. BBC: a new era for women's tech begins with a mother's voice. Podcasts dissected it. TikToks quoted it. Oprah called it the most important keynote of the decade. But Charlotte didn't chase the coverage. She went home, changed into pajamas, and fed her son. Because this was the life she'd fought for. The one that didn't require filters or applause, just presence. The following month, the United Nations invited her to join their Women's Innovation Board. She accepted. Thrive received its Series A round, led entirely by women investors. She accepted that too. But when Forbes asked her to pose for their next cover, she declined. "Put my team on it," she said. "Every woman who helped build this. I don't need to be the face. I just need to keep building." And she did. With every school she funded, every therapy center she opened, every life she quietly changed, Charlotte didn't aim to be the most powerful woman in the room. She aimed to make sure every woman knew she belonged in the room to begin with. Years passed. Thrive expanded to 72 countries. Her son grew into a kind, brilliant boy who loved robots and strawberry pancakes. Charlotte never remarried. She never needed to. Her life was full, her heart whole. One day, while walking through a park, she overheard 2 young women talking. "She's the reason I went back to school," one said, pointing at a billboard with Charlotte's quote. The other nodded. "She made me feel like being broken didn't mean I was worthless." Charlotte smiled quietly and kept walking, because that was the legacy, not the app, not the speech, but the reminder. You don't have to burn down to rise, you can bloom. As Charlotte rocked her son to sleep one evening, he looked up with tired eyes and asked, "Mama, were you ever scared?" She kissed his forehead. "Every day," she whispered, "but I did it anyway." He smiled and closed his eyes, and Charlotte leaned back in the rocker, tears slipping down her cheeks, not from pain, from peace, because she'd survived, she'd built, she'd inspired, and most of all, she'd never let anyone write her ending. So the story has ended. And if you're still here, reading these final words, then maybe, just maybe, something in Charlotte's journey touched a part of your heart. Maybe it reminded you that silence isn't strength. That healing doesn't always come with revenge, but with truth. Charlotte didn't win by screaming louder. She won by standing still, by not crumbling when the world tried to erase her. She turned betrayal into boundaries, and pain into purpose. As the old heterodox quote goes, sometimes we must be shattered to discover what we're made of. So if you're standing in your own storm right now, just know, you're not weak. You're becoming. And hey, if this story moved you in any way, drop a comment and tell us what part hit the hardest. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, so more hearts like yours can find their way here. We're building more than stories here. We're building healing. Together.